All right. Good morning and welcome to the last episode of season 2 of the Can You Fix Nigeria Challenge energy section. Thank you. I wanted to first, before I start today, I wanted to just thank those of you who have been with me on this journey over the last 10 episodes, just to review the energy sector in Nigeria with a view of identifying good practices and to speak uh, with all of you and so many of my guests over these last 10 episodes. So today what I'm doing is I'm doing a wrap up and I'm taking the best lessons that we've taken over this last 10 episodes. I do hope that you enjoy it. Please remember to give me comments on the YouTube channel if there is anything intriguing or anything that you want me to clarify further. Appreciate again uh, your support and being with me on this journey for season 2. Before I go into most of the lessons or the lessons that we've taken, I want to take the time to just give my sincere appreciation to all the people, all the guests who have helped us uh, over this second season. People who have spoken with me. In particular, I want to say thank you to Mr. Adeola Adeyanju, who covered the downstream section, Dr. Ufort Dr. Xavier Ufo to cover the technical safety, engineer Fisaya Lagbe who covered the technical standards, Mr. Muiwaki Yosoe who covered pipeline security, Ms. Adiola Sumola who covered renewables. I want also to say thank you to Mr. Utu Dodo who covered labor issues and I want to say thank you to Mr. Obashola Badeshino, who covered financing major projects for us. It was great having this discussion with all of you over season 2. And here are the top 10 messages or lessons that I took from the season. Number one lesson that I've taken from this season, season 2, is that with the NNPC, and remember our focus has mainly been on the NFPC being the major player in our energy section or in our energy sector in Nigeria, the main issue that I've learned is number one with regards to their strategy. And that's the fact that their strategy is too diverse, is too broad in focus. Recently, I was listening to Chief Pius Akinyelure, who is the new chairman of the board of the NMPCL, and he was talking about their 8 focus areas during the 2023 annual general meeting of the NMPCL. By the way, that was their first annual general meeting, and it was something remarkable that they are even able to hold that. But he mentioned up to 8 different issues. So, for example, they wanted to grow oil production in Nigeria to about 2 million barrels a day. They wanted to ensure that we have 70% of the refining capacity done in Nigeria by 2025, and that's by upgrading all our refineries. They wanted to do better security and increase the uptime of our facilities to 90%. They wanted to do more gas production. And he mentioned the word, oh, we're going to do that by doing more, seeking more alternate funding. Uh, in addition to that, there was a statement about performing all the FIDs for the floating LNG portfolio that they had. And a good thing is, yes, I agree that they are doing this. Recently in December, there was the FID for the UTM floating LNG in Nigeria. So that's something else they are doing. In addition to this, they mentioned green future, green energy, a focus on green energy. They talked about developing the industrial cluster around Kano, Ajaokuta. He mentioned up to 6 or 7 places. And then he also talked about better crude trading capacity. Now, the issue I've got is now, and all of that sound very good, but in what he has mentioned there, he's talked about, I guess, when he talks about Kano and Ajaokuta, he will be talking about fracking. You've talked about green energy. You've talked about floating LNG. We've talked about oil production. We've talked about refining and refining capacity. We've talked about gas production. So it's just too diverse, too broad. And usually when you set a target that is this big and so diverse, the challenge usually is that one is not able to meet those challenges because they are just too much. You cannot get the team, you cannot get the people to focus on one thing. There's something to be said for picking one thing and getting it done. And I just, so my first message to our listeners, and if our people at NNPCL are opportune to listen to this, is that your strategy is not right because it's too diverse. Very closely tied to that is that another lesson I took from this session is that when we look at the company, we said that this company is a bit too top heavy. So we've got about 33 people at executive level, and we're not even talking board. We have not talked about the board and all of that. So there way too many people at the top for them to be able to pull together and get the job done. And I think the third thing I was going to say about their strategy is that the company is yet to learn that for them to be successful, they need to recruit the best people. You cannot have a business that is 25 billion or thereabout in portfolio or size and be making your appointments based on political appointments. Rather, what you should be doing is that you should be getting global best practices, global recruiters to help you appoint the right people. Let's be honest, the person who runs an NPC does not necessarily have to be a Nigerian if you want it to run successfully. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there are not many successful Nigerians who can run the place, but pick the best person. I was opportune to listen to the CEO, MD of First Bank, recently, Dr. Sholade Duto, and he was talking about how he got recruited as CEO of First Bank. And basically, they brought in, I think it was McKinsey, to help them with that recruitment process. He did not even apply. He was encouraged to put his application. They did all the interviews and everything, and he ended up being selected as the most competent person to run the company. That was the guy who did not apply. But the reason that worked was because the company in the first place opened up their mind to say, we're not going to do the recruitment, we're not going to do political appointment, we're going to give this to a third party and let them help us to select the best capable person. So at the strategy level, three things for NNPCL. The strategy is too diverse. The executive level is too top heavy. And number three, there needs to be better selection for them to be able to make some progress. Number two, I'm going to do on to number two. Number two has to do with the business model itself. So one of the things that we discussed when we had the first and second episode was the business model of the NNPCL. And one of the things that I learned from that particular episode is that this current model, where we have the production sharing contracts and production sharing agreements, and the JV model, is not serving NNPCL well. Ultimately, NNPCL needs to reduce its equity of 60% in the JV because to a large extent is limiting how that business is being run. Somebody is operating, but another person is the majority shareholder. So every decision needs to go to him. And therefore, the people who are operating they are handicapped, they are handcuffed. The business will run better if you allow the operator, the guy who is closest to the decision, to run the business. There's a principle called the principle of singularity, that the people who are closest to an issue should be allowed to take the decision for that issue. And at the moment, we're running a multi-billion-dollar business, but we're not allowing the people who are closest to the business to run the decisions. And that's not good. So the way to address that is that we should sell more of the equity to those operators and reduce the NNPC share. NNPC should also consider, this is what you have done with the LLNG model, and that LLNG model works. NNPCL deliberately took a 49% ownership stake in LNG so that you will not be controlling all the decisions. You are a minority shareholder, so to say. And that business has worked very well. I want to encourage us that we should be using that model for all the other businesses. Also, under this business model, there's something that we can now see the trend. Just about 2 years ago, we passed the PIB law. The hope, after about 20 years, that law, now the problem is that the boat has sailed. We did not pass that law on time, and we're thinking that that law, when we pass it, we engender investment. But rather than doing that, what is happening is that all of the IOCs, which we wanted to partner with under that law, are now divesting. ExxonMobil divested, they want to sell to Seplat. Just this week, we're hearing now that Shell is divesting their downstream SPDC for $2.4 billion. Now, we need to be careful so that we can make the best of that model. This PIB law has not helped us much, and we need to see why. We need to see why in terms of the model and to select the model that is right. But to make the best of that model, there's something else that comes in, and that's the fact that NMPCL itself needs to develop operational capability. And I'm sorry to say this because a lot of people may not agree with me, but I believe that we need more experts to be able to develop that operational capability. It's a world-class industry. It's the industry that invests the highest amount of money. It's the industry that is the most technically challenging. So it only makes sense that you bring the best people to work at it. That's what the Saudis are doing. That's what the Emiratis are doing. That's what the Qataris are doing. And they are making money at it. So we should learn also that in Nigeria, we need to bring in as many experts as possible to help us develop the operational capability, which we don't have at the moment. We don't have a really successful operating company in Nigeria. And that's to our shame. We have run this business for 70 years. Our first oil well was 1956. You cannot be doing something for almost 70 years and not have capability at it. There's not something's wrong there. So we need to develop operational capability. And the best way to do that is set up the company and bring in the best technically competent people from around the world, pay them, let them help us to grow our people. And when we have grown our people, we can ask them to go. But until we have that operational capability, please be humble to ask for help. Lastly, on the business model, the last thing on the business model is to talk about diversification. It's strange that if you look at Qatar Energy, they are partnering in Mozambique, in Namibia, in the US. Saudi Aramco is doing the same everywhere around the world. The Qataris are doing the same. Statoil is investing in Nigeria, is the national oil company of Norway. Petrobras is in Nigeria. They're the national oil company of Brazil. They are all everywhere. All the other national oil companies are doing things globally. Why is NMPCL only operating in Nigeria? Why are we doing that? NMPCL was formed in 1979. It's a 40-year-old company. The problem with operating in Nigeria alone is that you're not running to global best practices, number one. And every time there's a problem in Nigeria, the company suffers. Whereas you could diversify your portfolio and be earning money from other places, partnering with people. What stops us from saying there's a good business in the US, we want to invest and be 5% owner in that business? That's what all the IOCs do. That's what all the NOCs do. And it's about time that we pick that up also. So to summarize, in terms of the business model, we need to review the JV model. It's not working. We should encourage ourselves to use the NLNG model. We should see how we are going to be able to develop operational capability. And we should also try and internationalize so that we can diversify our portfolio in terms of the business model. Lesson number 3. So lesson number 3 is on the issue of the subsidy removal. And this one is very political and it's created a lot of issues. But let me be very clear and state that the subsidy removal is the correct decision for Nigeria. I know that is not a popular thing to say. It's unpopular. But one of the things that we will learn about leadership in life is that the right decisions in life are not always the most popular one. Even as parents or as leaders and managers in our offices, we know that sometimes things have to be unpopular for them to be right. That is why we say to our children, go to bed at 8:30 and 9, even if they want to watch TV to 1 a.m. It may be unpopular, but it's the right decision. The subsidy removal is the correct decision for Nigeria. The only thing now is that the saving from this subsidy removal must be reinvested properly. That must trickle down to the masses. It must affect our healthcare, our educational sector, our security networks, and all of that. So this is the way to do it. The subsidy removal is the right thing to do. I also want to say one more thing on the subsidy removal and the downstream sector before we leave it. The government of Nigeria is now refurbishing a lot of our refineries. We know that they are doing, they've just achieved mechanical completion on the Port Harcourt refinery, the whole Port Harcourt refinery. We know that work is going on in the Kaduna refinery, and so many other things are going on. I want to encourage Nigeria and the Nigerian government and the NNPCL, please stop selling all the assets. Stop selling all the assets. We sold Element Petrochemical a few years back. How did that work for us? It did not work. The people who took it over paid the money off in 1 year and they are raking in billions now. That money will have been used to help our country. I will encourage you to see what the Indonesians did. Like Shell, Total, and all these people are leaving Nigeria. They also left Indonesia in 2017 and 18. All that Indonesia did was that they set up Pertamina to be able to take on those assets and use it for the benefit of the people, for the government of that country, rather than follow the Russian models where we will just create a lot of oligarchs and oligarchy, where there are a few billionaires who have bought everything to the detriment of the people. We should be seeking actively to nationalize this business first and have a capable operator come to run it. Okay, so that's the lesson number 3 on downstream sector and the subsidy removal. It's an unpopular decision, it's the right one, and the saving from it needs to trickle down. Lesson number 4 is on operational excellence. So, like you're aware, we have a diverse portfolio of operators in Nigeria. Upstream, downstream, we have floating LNG people doing gas to liquid. The international companies seem to be doing well because at the end of the day, they have international standards to follow, they have their corporate guidelines. Our local operators who are operating marginal fields are struggling. We've had a lot of accidents in recent times. We've had a lot of pipeline explosion. We had an FPSO which exploded. I mean, we've got a lot of issues, and that's because we're not following the right operational excellence models. So we need to develop a technical standard regime and enforce it. I remember that session I had with Mr. Alagbe. One of the things he kept repeating is that the standards and the codes and the laws are there. The problem is that it seems we are not enforcing things. And we need to get into this regime of not only having the codes, but ensuring that those codes and those laws are properly enforced. That's why the DPR is there. And I'm hoping that people can begin to do that. Secondly, we have the issue with safety and environmental regulation. There's no clear authority managing safety and regulation in Nigeria, safety and environmental issues. We have the NCDMB who's managing local content, how much local content we have, fine. Local content is good. But of more importance is the safety of the people who are working there. We have NIMASA who is more interested in who is exporting what and what not. But the safety, which is the primary issue, we don't have a regulator. We don't have a regulator. And we need to get into a position where we create a capable regulator or adopt the regulation of another country that has demonstrated competence in this area. The US EPA is there, we can adopt it. We have a health safety executive from the UK, we can adopt it. If we don't want to create our own, we can adopt something that works from somewhere else and use that. But all of these things are needed for operational excellence. A third point, which is of critical importance, is the issue of unionism in our organizations and the impact of that on innovation. I know, again, this is another one that is not popular, but let's be honest. We work in a sector where people earn millions, literally millions. But every year we have a strike, we have a union shutdown, we have all of this stuff. And this thing is impacting on our innovation because our partners who we are working for half of the time, they know that all that we are doing when we're talking about this unionism is all about money. It's about how to get more money rather than serious issues. It's impacting on discipline. There are 1,001 people who are there who are not pulling their weight, but they cannot be sacked, they cannot be demoted, they cannot be removed, they cannot even be transferred in some cases. Because the union will come in and intervene for them and they will shut everything down. A few years ago, we had people who were spy police, who are not even employees. They shut down Mobile House in Lagos for months. So the impact of unionism, again, in our organizations and in our energy organizations is impacting on innovation, on operational excellence for these organizations. And we need to look at that. So lesson number 4 is that for us to be able to achieve operational excellence, we need to have technical standards, good technical standards, and enforce them. We need to bring in a safety and environmental regulatory organization. We need to check the impact of unions in those organizations. People must be able to work. There should be discipline. There should be deliverables. We should be gone with the days where you give people 100 million budget, they can't deliver anything, but he gets away with it because somebody's going to give excuses. Yeah. Okay, so that's lesson number 4 from this energy sector review. Lesson number 5, what's not lesson number 5? Lesson number 5 on the energy sector is on renewables. I mean, my sit down with Ms. Adiola told me something. Actually, our renewable policy is not coherent. It's not coherent. It's not consistent. We need to have a policy goal that is coherent and not just copy other people. Europe is going to phase out hydrocarbons in 2025. We must phase out hydrocarbon in 2025. We are not at the same level of development with Europeans. We're not. We have to accept that. We have to accept that. I mean, I remember listening to Mr. Al-Kabi. Saad Al-Kabi is CEO of Qatar Energy at Gastech 2 years ago. And he was saying that at the end of the day, there's still over 1 billion people in Africa and the Indian subcontinent who don't have electricity. They don't have electricity. We're not talking about whether they have EV cars or whatever. They don't even have electricity at all. And those people also want to come out. So our policy must be consistent with that. And that's why, for me, our renewables policy is desirable. We need to do it, but it must be consistent with the growth and development of our country. And it must be in line with the need for poverty alleviation. The need for poverty alleviation must be paramount in renewables, in developing that renewable policy. We need to avoid the copycat approach. This is very, very important because once we make some of these decisions, the long-term effect of getting it wrong will be too significant. Lesson number 6. Lesson number 6 is on all pipeline operation and security. So we had an interesting session when we talked with Mr. Muyiwa from Terra Energy. from Canada, and sharing his experience. At least the good thing I picked from that was the fact that, okay, the challenges we have with pipeline security are not specific to Nigeria. They happen everywhere in the world, particularly in South America and in Asia and in the Far East. However, the fact that it happens in other places does not mean that we should not, at this stage now, begin to adopt global best practices. How can we adopt those global best practices? As a minimum, at the point where we design our pipeline, we should adhere to global best designs. Our pipelines need to be buried. We need to have protection bonds around them. We need to provide them with leak detection systems and things like that, at least as a minimum, so that not everybody can just go to our lines or tap it and cause environmental disaster all around the place. We need to avoid the situation where people are running pipelines behind somebody's backyard and people are spreading clothes on it. What occurs in saner environment is that a pipeline and energy corridor is identified. You identify an energy corridor, all the pipeline that you run must go through the energy corridor. You cannot just take from one village to another village to another village to another town. No. Establish an energy corridor that will run from Port Harcourt to Bonny, or run from Warri to Escravos, whatever it is. Establish an energy corridor. Anybody who is installing a pipeline must get permit to put his pipeline into that energy corridor or to tie into that energy corridor. This is the way to do it. Okay? Now, that energy corridor itself, we should create it and allow competent pipeline network operators to run it. There's no need for us to insist that a Shell or an Exxon should go and build pipeline. It's not their core business anyway. They are operators. There are specific people who operate pipelines. Mr. Muyiwa gave us the example of TransCanada on the day when we had this discussion. So we can have a Trans-Nigeria or whatever, who is the operator of a pipeline, and everybody who wants to run a pipeline will just connect to the Trans-Nigeria pipeline route, and then they will pay charges for transmitting. It's like using a tolled road. Anybody can run on the road. You just pay a toll. In the meantime, the last thing to say about pipeline operation and security is that at the moment now, we have too many non-compliant pipelines. There are cross-country pipelines everywhere in the Niger Delta. Cross-country pipelines. People running pipeline behind where somebody is frying plantain and frying akara and putting their clothes on and the people drying their clothes on the pipelines. It's not right. We must therefore put a stop to it. How do we do that? We give people a moratorium of 5 to 10 years to say either you upgrade your pipeline or you decommission it. We will set a standard. We should set a standard to say this is the standard we want for every pipeline of every operator. Yeah, it must be compliant with API 5L. It must be this. It must be that. Set it up. Set up that code, that regulation, the compliance statement, and ask everybody to either retrofit their pipeline, which is non-consistent at the moment with that, and if they cannot do it, decommission the line. You give them a 10-year period to do it. They don't need to do it in one day, but they have 10 years. 10 years will come in no time. Let them go and retrofit it. So for pipeline operation, let's learn to follow global standards. Let's consider having a Trans-Nigeria pipeline corridor where everywhere, all the pipelines that we're running can go into the corridor. We can monitor it better. Let's have a specific operator to run that corridor. Everybody else can tie into that corridor. And all non-compliant pipelines now should be removed and retrofitted or decommissioned. So that's the lesson on pipeline operation and security. Okay. The second part of the pipeline thing is to talk about our pipelines to Europe. We talked about that under our gas monetization discussion. And at the moment, we know that Nigeria has two major pipeline projects which are going to Europe. So one is the Nigeria-Morocco line, and the other is the Trans-Sahara line, which is going through Algeria. Between those two projects, it's going to cost Nigeria about 32 billion over 25 years to deliver those two jobs. Problem is that we don't have the money. We don't have $32 billion. We know it. The people that we are partnering with should also know that we don't have $32 billion to be able to do this business. So what we should do is that we should prioritize. We should prioritize and select one project and focus on it. Why is that important? In any case, both projects are taking gas to the same destination. They're taking it to Europe. There's no need for us to build the two at the same time. Yeah. If you look at how they build the Euro pipe, which comes from Russia to Germany, which is the main gas trunk in Europe, they didn't build the two. Even the Europeans who have money, they did not build two at once. They built Euro pipe 1 first, then they build Euro pipe 2, and then they are adding to it. So we should not therefore go and try and see and try and establish two pipelines, one to Morocco and one through Algeria simultaneously. No, we should pick one and then deliver that. And my recommendation is that we should be picking the Nigeria-Morocco pipeline to deliver first. Why? So the question is why? Well, that line is going to go through 16 countries. At the moment, that line is going to be an extension of the West African gas pipeline. West African gas pipeline already covers five countries. We've already started that. So it's easier to continue to build that rather than go and start a fresh project from scratch. This is number one. Okay. Number two, the Nigeria-Morocco line can also take gas from places, new gas locations like Senegal, and bring in, and you can partner with Senegal and bring that gas to Morocco. There's a lot that can be done there. Number three, that route is safer. It can be better monitored, it can be better maintained, rather than go and build a pipeline in the middle of the Sahara. Nobody can monitor it. So for me, I think at the start, we should at least focus on one because we cannot deliver both projects simultaneously. And the one I'm recommending personally, based on my own experience, is that we should go for the Nigeria-Morocco line first. So how do we finance a big project like that? Lesson number 8 is on financing major projects in Nigeria. I remember speaking to Mr. Basholakpe on this, and one of the issues that I learned from it is that we, as a country, don't have enough money to be able to finance some of these major mega projects. But it doesn't also help that our reputation is not the greatest at the moment. So for us to be able to attract money in, we must improve on the ease of doing business. This is number one. We should also avoid the unnecessary regulation. I mentioned the PIB law when we started this summary session, and the impact that has now had on so many of our IOCs where they're all living. So we need to be transparent by improving the ease of doing business in our country. We need to avoid unnecessary regulation. But we also need to look inward. The whole world are actually struggling financially. Apart from the US or maybe US or China, there's not a lot of money anywhere in the world at the moment. So no, it's highly unlikely that people will just take 25 billion out of their own economy and come and throw it to you. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I know how many times President Buhari, when he was president, went to Qatar and went to UAE trying to raise funds for Nigeria. It did not happen. It did not. Now, President Tinubu has been luckier because of the money he got from India and or the pledges he got from India and from Saudi Arabia. But it's not always been like that. So we may not have a lot of money coming in. And if you don't have a lot of money coming in, there are two things you have to do. You have to look inward first, and you have to eliminate waste within your own area. And the best way for us to do this is that we should develop our own infrastructure development bank for mega projects. Yeah, there are billions sitting in our pension funds. We should consolidate this into a big pot and think about infrastructure banks. I had the privilege of listening to Mr. Adebayo Ogunlesi this week. He's the guy from GIP Investment, Infrastructure Investment. They're the guys who used to own, what's the name? Gatwick Airport in the UK and many other airports around the world, including London City Airport, Sydney Airport, and so many others. And this week, they sold their investment bank, which was an infrastructure bank. They sold that bank to BlackRock. Yeah. And BlackRock himself, Larry Flink from BlackRock, was doing this interview with Adebayo Ogunlesi. And it was unbelievable. They sold that bank for 12.5 billion. That's a lot of money. It's a Nigerian guy. Sold his investment portfolio for $12.5 billion because it was an infrastructure bank. But let me tell you what's even more surprising. BlackRock, who is buying it, are saying that even though they bought it for 12 point something, they can grow that business to $1 trillion business. And he backed that up by saying that 20 years ago when he bought EIG, people were laughing at him. He's grown that business now to 2 trillion. Infrastructure development is the future. So we're not going to be able to finance our own business, but if we plan ourselves right, we have the local competence. We can bring people like Adebayo Ogunlesi. We have competent people in this country. Like I said, he just sold his own for 12.5 billion. So bring those kind of guys, let them help you set up one, and let us see what we can do. We can develop our own infrastructure bank and use that infrastructure bank to develop our energy sector, to develop other infrastructure as well. We also need to learn to be able to partner better with ADB, Afrinexim Bank, pension fund managers. That's where the big money is. These are the guys who can bring you the big money that we need for this infrastructure development of the energy sector. And I'm hoping that people who are listening can ask them, can push us in this direction, because this is the only way to go. We're not going to raise 32 billion from our local banks. Okay, so financing major projects, what is the key again? Ease of doing business, better transparency, avoid unnecessary regulation, take positive action, start an infrastructure development bank now, and find the right partnerships so that you can raise the money to develop your own infrastructure. Lesson number 9. Lesson number 9 is on gas monetization strategy, and the fact that our gas monetization strategy needs to be better defined. It's not clear whether our strategy is based on domestic gas, use of domestic gas, or is it export focused? Now, and I know that if you ask me personally, I think we need to be export focused, because we don't have the infrastructure yet to distribute gas nationwide. We don't. That's the truth. The market, the local market, is not big enough. But that debate has been raging on for 10, 20 years. Somebody who is an expert in that area needs to come out and advise government properly, and so that government knows where we are going. Yeah, and once we know where we are going, then we should be able to focus all our energy in that place, rather than oh, today we're doing domestic gas, or tomorrow we want to expand the LNG. There's no reason, like I keep saying, why we have been so successful with the Nigerian LNG, but we have not increased this capacity. It's a criminal offense, honestly. There's no justification why we have not continued to increase that business constantly. And I thank God again for President Buhari, for approving Nigeria LNG 27, $10 billion project. Great idea. Now we need to see what we're going to do with the rest of our LNG and our gas, and see how we're going to better monetize it. Okay. Now, having said that we should be export focused, I think there's still a lot of play, a lot of room for us to do our local gas and our local LPG. Yeah. Because what that does for us is it helps us to address the concerns that we may have on deforestation and environmental issues. Apologize for the typo there. I wanted to say address, to address impact of deforestation and environmental issues. So we need to at least make the effort also. And I'm glad that our refinery, we have a lot of refineries coming up. The Dangote refinery is up now. We have the Port Harcourt, Old Port Harcourt, New Port Harcourt is coming. and the Kaduna. So hopefully we should be able to put a lot of LPG into the market and actually turn this country around in terms of energy once and for all. Finally, the last point to be made is on the gas to liquid. And I wanted to speak specifically about the LNG and about the Escravos GTL. And look, I'm a big advocate of the Nigerian LNG. It's a fantastic company. They've done very well, but they can do better. They can do better. And for me, what we need to do now is to build on the advantage that we have from the LNG and from Escravos GTL. We need to be able to build on the advantage that we have. Not many countries are better than us on LNG and GTL. Once you take away Qatar, you take away the US, you take away Australia, I think we will be in the next pack of the countries that have expertise on LNG and GTL. We should build this advantage. Other people are coming fast. Mozambique has already delivered 2 or 3 LNG projects. Total is doing a project in Mozambique. Exxon is there, Anadeco is there. They've already delivered on the Coral LNG. They've done a floating LNG. They are going to catch up with us very quickly if we don't build on our advantage. And once they catch up with us, whatever market they go is lost for the next 24 years. Yeah, we need to recheck. In Nigeria also, we have a lot of our own LNG jobs that we talked about. We know about Brass LNG. Brass LNG has been going on forever. The technology has changed, the stakeholders have changed, but the business is still there. The proposal is there. I don't know how many times they've gone to FID and did not come out. OK LNG went to FID in 2006, 2007. We're almost 20 years after that now. OK LNG has not been decided. Ibom LNG, people were talking about Ibom LNG in 2010. 2008, 2010, people were talking about Ibom LNG at Kwaibo terminal. I remember that. So there are a lot of LNG stuff. But again, I go back to what I said previously. We don't have the money to do all of this. We cannot do Brass LNG and do OK LNG and do Ibom. We don't have the money for it. So again, and we probably don't even have enough gas for all of them. Now, keep in mind, like I mentioned, somebody else is already doing UTM floating LNG as well. So there is a lot of jobs here and there. We need to sit down, pick up our gas master plan. I remember BG did a gas master plan for Nigeria years ago. Pick up the gas master plan, dust it up, and look for the most profitable, the most optimal design, the most optimal project, and focus on one thing. We should not be doing UTM, floating LNG, Ibom LNG, OK LNG, Brass LNG, and for 20 years we cannot deliver any of them. It's nonsense. So again, optimize, focus on one, scale it so that we can have the best result. And I think these are the top 10 lessons that I've taken from our energy sector. Need to optimize and focus on take the competitive advantage on our LNG experience, determine what we're going to do, whether we're going to do export focus for our gas, for our LNG. We talked about that. We talked about financing major projects and the need for an infrastructure and development bank. We talked about selecting one of our 2 big projects for the gas pipeline to Europe. We talked about renewables, that we should not just copy Europe, rather we should develop what will be helpful for our people and remove poverty alleviation. We talked about having a trans-Nigeria pipeline where we can take things around and rather than having operators build their own independent lines. We talked about operational excellence, about regulation and enforcing it. We talked about the potential benefit of our subsidy removal. We talked about the business model, and the need for NNPC to reduce their stake. And finally, we talked about the strategy, that the strategy of NNPCL is too broad, and there's a need to bring it into focus. I want to take the time again to thank you for being with me on season 2, episodes 1 to 10 of the Can You Fix Nigeria Challenge. Until I come your way again on this season, on the Can You Fix Nigeria Challenge next year, I'm looking to be doing season 3, and season 3 will be focused on our banking sector. So until I come again to your way, thank you. and adios. Bye-bye.